All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth module. This week, we'll be exploring conservation law enforcement agencies. Unlike traditional police officers that are pretty much exclusively housed in departments of public safety, conservation law enforcement officers are normally housed in departments of natural resources or departments of conservation, parks departments, something other than a department of public safety. But there are some that are housed in departments of public safety, but most of them are housed in a Department of Conservation or a Department of Natural Resources, something like that. But regardless of where they're housed, they're part of government agencies which are overwhelmingly bureaucratic. All right, so bureaucracies are the most common organizational structure among government agencies as well as businesses. Bureaucratic organizations are supposed to be rational, which means that every part of the agency or the structure has a purpose. Things aren't just added willy-nilly. They don't just pull things out of the air. Supposedly, now in a true bureaucracy, everything that's in there has a purpose, and that makes the structure, quote-unquote, rational. They're also supposed to be impersonal, where everyone is treated the same. And this is a result of task specialization and extensive written rules and regulations. Because every part of the organization has a purpose, every person or part of that organization or bureaucracy has a specialized set of tasks that they're responsible for, and written rules and regulations are then used to outline the rules and procedures for every employee. Normally, job requirements and other assigned tasks are also clearly stated. And then finally, bureaucracies have a hierarchical structure with a chain of command, and that clearly says who is in charge of who and who is in charge of what, and all that is very clearly outlined. So the kind of positive aspects of the bureaucracy is that because of this task specialization and because of its ability to compartmentalize, it allows the organization to handle a lot of different tasks and provide specialization in those tasks. And one of the biggest things that came out of bureaucracies is that it has really reduced police misconduct due to the extensive rules and regulations, policies, paperwork, the strong command structure. Everyone's clearly who's being supervised by who. All those things have really contributed to a decrease in police misconduct. On the other hand, though, even though bureaucracies can handle a lot of different things, they're also very rigid and very inflexible, and they do not adapt well to environmental changes. And if they do, it's very, very slow to adapt. And part of that is because you have all these policies, procedures, and regulations, and all that is focused on the internal functioning of the organization. And because of that, they also can become kind of inward-looking, where they're only focusing on themselves and they become isolated from the people they're supposed to be serving. Think about how hard it is sometimes if you have to call a government agency for something to ask a question. Think about how hard it is to actually get a hold of the person that you're trying to get a hold of. Okay? That's one of the problems with a bureaucracy. And then communication also will break down. The more levels of bureaucracy you have, and that communication must go through, the better chance that it will break down. Think about it like the telephone game. In a bureaucracy, you have these different layers, right, of structure. So it's kind of like a telephone game. If something starts down here, it's got to go through this person, and then this person, and this person, and this person. Well, each of those points, there's obviously a chance where the communication could break down. Finally, one of the knocks on bureaucracies is that they don't really utilize employee talents very well, and they don't really utilize employee creativity. Why? Well, because bureaucracies like things the way they are. Bureaucracies, think about it like as a person. A bureaucracy has spent a lot of time setting itself up to be this structure that it is. And if you start using a lot of creativity and things like that, well, that kind of flies in the face of what a bureaucracy does, right? Because the bureaucracies don't like to change. Well, creativity causes change. So it's kind of the employee creativity is kind of the exact opposite of what a bureaucracy wants to do. All right, so that's kind of a quick summary of what a bureaucratic structure looks like, what a bureaucratic structure does. Excuse me. All right, so let's talk more specifically now about traditional police and conservation officer agencies. All right, traditional police agencies are normally quasi-military, which means they're not exactly like the military, but they have some characteristics in common with the military, such as uniforms, military rank designations, an authoritarian style, etc. Okay, but they're also bureaucracies. All right, so for a police bureaucracy, a traditional police bureaucracy, they are complex organizations that have a wide variety of tasks, but with one common goal. Right, that's a bureaucracy. Tasks are highly specialized within that agency, and they're grouped together into divisions or bureaus. Right. Hierarchical structure with a clear division of labor and chain of command. They have lots of written rules and regulations. Information flows up and down the chain of command. And then there's clear career paths through which employees move through the organization in an orderly fashion. All right? Police agencies are bureaucracies. They have all the characteristics of what a bureaucracy would be. All right, so conservation agencies are also generally bureaucracies. But they're a little bit different because they're in departments of natural resources. So they still have these many different bureaus, but you're talking about things like wildlife division, fisheries division, forestry division. Okay, and then conservation officers are located within one of these divisions. So there's normally like a protection division or a law enforcement division, and then conservation officers would be in that division. But it depends on the agency. Sometimes they're even just in wildlife division. It really depends on that particular agency. So the officers themselves are just one division within this larger department that has the mission of managing and protecting natural resources. So within that division, conservation officers can either be organized similarly to people in other divisions, or they can also have this quasi-military structure or some combination of both. Okay, so for example, in Missouri, first-line supervisors are called district supervisors, where in other agencies, first-line supervisors are called sergeants. Well, they're called district supervisors because that is a designation across the agency. First-line supervisors across the agency are called district supervisors. So conservation officers are no different in that respect. All right, but then within their own division, sometimes they have these characteristics of traditional police agencies. There's often a hierarchical command structure, which is usually more formalized or can be more formalized than it is in other divisions within that agency. Clear chain of command. Tasks are grouped into separate divisions or bureaus and have extensive rules and regulations. So really the main difference here we're talking about, and probably the most important difference between traditional police agencies and conservation officer agencies, are that conservation officers are housed in these natural resources agencies that are not law enforcement agencies. And then this can also cause some issues. So think about that for a minute. You have officers within an agency that is not a law enforcement agency. Think about for a minute what kind of issues you think that can raise. Okay, so sometimes you have people in the agency that just don't understand the importance of law enforcement of the division, and they may not understand the role and function of conservation officers. Okay, so you may have people within your own agency that don't, or within their own agency that don't see the value in having conservation officers. And then this kind of understanding, or lack of understanding, it can be problematic when complaints are levied against conservation officers. Because just like traditional police officers, conservation officers get complaints levied against them. Other employees may not understand may not understand the relationship between order maintenance and law enforcement, or may not understand the importance of law enforcement in natural resources management, and that can also cause problems within that agency. Sometimes decisions that are made regarding vehicles and other equipment are made by people that don't have a law enforcement background, or may not understand what the officer's needs are. And this actually happened while I was working. The agency accepted a bid for certain trucks, but those trucks wouldn't do. They weren't big enough. The cab wasn't big enough to do what the conservation officers needed them to do. So they had to figure out what to do at that point because that wasn't taken into account, when they decided to buy these particular vehicles. And then also there can be jealousy and misunderstandings because of the specialized nature of conservation officers. They need particular types of equipment that are specific to their type of job. And sometimes that can lead to some jealousy or hard feelings, between divisions. But obviously those type of issues would not be present in a traditional police agency. Now, obviously there still might be some jealousy and stuff between divisions within a police agency. But you wouldn't have this, kind of lack of understanding about why certain things are important. All right. With that, I'm going to quit for today, or quit for this week. Make sure you do your assignments, and I'll see you next week.